Welcome to the Epic Summary Podcast and our special deep dive into a single compelling book. Today we're pulling back the curtain on Government Gangsters, the Deep State, the Truth, and the Battle for Our Democracy by Kash Patel. Now, this isn't just another political commentary. It's a rare account from someone who's really been deep inside the U.S. government at the highest levels.
That's absolutely right. I mean, Kash Patel's background is pretty extraordinary, isn't it? It gives him this unique vantage point. He's been a public defender, federal prosecutor, congressional investigator, and held senior roles across the White House, NSC, ODNI, even chief of staff at DoD. And crucially, he was the lead investigator for the House Intel Committee's Russiagate probe. So, yeah, right in the thick of it.
Exactly. So our mission today is, well, to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights, maybe the most impactful moments from this book. We want to give you a clear sense of its core arguments, the allegations it makes, and importantly, the solutions it proposes for what Patel sees as this fundamental threat to American democracy.
Right. We'll walk you through Patel's definition, his specific definition of the deep state, look at some key examples he brings up, and then explore his ideas for reform, for reclaiming American democracy, as he puts it. The goal really is to eliminate his message and, well, hopefully pique your curiosity enough to check out the full book yourself.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, we're here to present the book's arguments and insights. We're summarizing its message. We're not taking sides or endorsing any particular viewpoint, just informing you about the ideas in this pretty significant work. Okay, so let's unpack this right away. The term deep state, it gets thrown around a lot, but Patel offers a very specific and pretty critical definition in Government Gangsters. What exactly does he mean by it?
Yeah, and this is really a core insight of the book. According to Patel, the deep state isn't, some shadowy cabal meeting in secret. Instead, he defines it as the systemic politicization of core American institutions by high-level leaders, officials already in power. These are people, he argues, who disregard objectivity, who weaponize the law against opponents, spread disinformation, violate their oaths, all for political or maybe personal gain. And he says it operates not just in government, but also includes elements in media, big tech, even NGOs.
That's quite a redefinition. It really shifts it from some hidden conspiracy to something more, I guess, insidious, like a politicization within legitimate institutions.
Exactly. Not an external force, but like a rot, as he might describe it, growing inside the system itself. And that distinction is fundamental to how he argues we should perceive it and, combat it. Patel asserts this is a real entrenched force, actively undermining, he says, the foundations of the republic. It's not theoretical for him. It's happening.
So if this deep state operates like he describes, politicizing, weaponizing institutions, what's the impact? What does it mean for self-government, for democracy?
Well, Patel argues it's an existential threat because it operates independently of elections, right? Independently of the will of the people. He claims it manipulates the national security apparatus, subverts presidential orders, twists reality to serve its own ends, effectively creating what he calls a tyranny, a system that controls the American people rather than serving them.
Tyranny, that's a really strong word. Does he get into specific ways this tyranny manifests, or is it more about that systemic subversion?
It's mostly focused on the systemic subversion, which he argues leads to that tyranny. The book frames this whole battle not just as partisan politics, but as a fundamental struggle over the nature of American government itself. It's presented as a choice: self-government by the people or rule by unelected oligarchs prioritizing their own power, bypassing democracy, essentially.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. Kash Patel was, as you said, deeply involved in investigating Russiagate, and this is where the book really dives into his specific allegations. How does Government Gangsters portray that whole event?
Well, Patel frames Russiagate basically as a manufactured scandal, even calls it a criminal conspiracy orchestrated by the Democrat Party. He claims they hired a foreign asset to fabricate false rumors about Donald Trump and then use those rumors to, quote, hijack law enforcement and unlawfully surveil him and his campaign, all to rig the election, in his view. That's a huge claim.
Wow. And he emphasizes this wasn't just politics, right? It had real consequences, consumed years of the presidency.
Exactly. He calls it a witch hunt investigation that crippled the administration's ability to govern effectively. He writes something like, the Trump era served as an apocalypse in the sense of unveiling truth, revealing these unaccountable elites in Washington. Elites who he believes think anything is justified to keep their power. For him, that's when the deep state's influence became undeniable.
And as the lead investigator on HPSCI, the House Intelligence Committee, he was right there. He connects his role directly to uncovering what the book calls this criminal conspiracy by government officials. Can you tell us more about the Nunes memo and its link to the Steele dossier as Patel lays it out?
Yeah, the book goes into detail here. The Nunes memo, released during Patel's investigation, exposed what he saw as serious misconduct. It revealed the FBI got a FISA warrant, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant to surveil Carter Page, a Trump campaign official. Now, FISA warrants are usually for foreign agents, right? A very high legal bar. Probable cause someone's an agent of a foreign power. Patel argues the FBI met this bar by essentially misleading the court, which, if true, is incredibly serious manipulation.
And the dossier itself. The book claims its origins are key to understanding the alleged abuse.
Absolutely crucial, according to Patel. The Steele dossier, he explains, was paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC through their law firm, Perkins Coie. The book argues this dossier had outlandish and easily falsifiable claims about Trump, and alleges the FBI used it to justify spying on the campaign without fully telling the FISA court where it came from its political origins. Patel asserts that funding trail is like the smoking gun, exposing the political motive behind the whole Russia collusion narrative and the surveillance.
These are incredibly serious allegations against the FBI. What stands out to you about Patel's claims regarding the Bureau? Does he present any alternative views, or is it solely focused on this alleged corruption?
Patel's focus is definitely laser sharp on what he identifies as corruption and politicization within the FBI.
Yeah.
He claims the Bureau has been weaponized, used to target political opponents, suppress citizens. He sees this as a major ongoing threat to American freedom. He doesn't really offer alternative interpretations in the book. It's presented as his findings as evidence of these claims.
And the Carter paid FISA warrant is like Exhibit A for this weaponization.
Yes, very much so. Patel claims getting that warrant let them spy on, well, potentially most, if not all, of the Trump campaign communications, all based on what he calls total fiction from that dossier. He further alleges, and this is another big claim, that the FBI intentionally altered documents and hid exculpatory evidence from the FISA court to get and keep that warrant. This, he argues, shows a deliberate disregard for due process, demonstrating how far he believes elements of the deep state would go.
Okay, moving beyond Russiagate. Government Gangsters also tackles the Mar-a-Lago raid, views it as an unprecedented escalation of political persecution. How does the book flesh that out?
Patel presents the raid as fundamentally politically motivated. He argues the FBI had to do what he calls judge shopping, meaning deliberately finding a specific magistrate judge they thought would be sympathetic, basically bypassing impartial review to get the warrant. He claims the timing, the circumstances. It all points to a motive beyond just getting classified documents back.
Interesting. And what's the book's theory then? What was the real reason for the raid, according to Patel, if it was political?
The book theorizes, and again, this is Patel's theory, that the raid might have been about retrieving documents Trump had declassified related to Russiagate and Hillary Clinton's email scandal. Documents Trump apparently wanted released. Patel suggests seizing them could prevent their release, effectively covering up, as he puts it, their own corrupt actions and the deep state's role in those earlier investigations.
Beyond actions against Trump himself, Patel also revisits January 6th and portrays it through a very different lens than the mainstream narrative.
That's right. He flatly asserts January 6th was not an insurrection or coup. He calls it a preventable security failure by the authorities. He argues the narrative around J6 had been weaponized to demonize the millions who voted for Trump, leading to the targeting of, in his words, law-abiding citizens just expressing grievances.
And he brings up this idea of a two-tier justice system too, right?
Yes. The book claims J6 protesters faced unusually harsh treatment, denied bail, long detentions compared to, say, left-wing protesters involved in violence. He contrasts these cases. He also points fingers at the media, saying they promoted a false narrative, amplified deep state actors, and suppressed other viewpoints, creating a skewed public perception.
That's quite a lot to unpack from Kash Patel's book. His definition of the deep state, these really detailed allegations about its operations. If you're finding this deep dive compelling and you want to get into all the evidence and arguments firsthand, we really encourage you to check out the link to Government Gangsters in our episode description. It's definitely a perspective you won't hear many other places. So, okay, if that's the problem, all these allegations about the deep state, what does Patel propose we do about it? Let's start with the Department of Justice. He lays out some specific reforms there.
He does. He advocates for a pretty thorough house cleaning at the DOJ. Stresses it needs to get back to equal application of the law. prosecuting federal crimes no matter who commits them, regardless of political party or status. He really emphasizes accountability for senior officials, prosecuting leakers, people who mishandle classified info, and especially those who abuse power for politics. And transparency, too. He calls for uniform standards for announcing investigations to stop what he sees as selective leaks designed to damage Republicans.
What's fascinating here is Patel has some pretty, well, radical ideas for the FBI beyond just personnel changes. What really stands out in his proposals for reforming the Bureau?
Yeah, some are quite striking. One of the biggest insights, or proposals, is his belief that to really depoliticize the FBI, you need to get it out of D.C. Physically, he proposes moving FBI headquarters out of Washington, argues it would break corrupt networks, reduce politicization, put agents back in everyday America focused on actual crime, not ideological witch hunts. He also wants to limit the FBI's authority, focus it just on real physical threats, shrink its general counsel office significantly, require DOJ approval for all investigations. Big changes.
Wow. And given how central the FISA court was in the Russiagate narrative, what reforms does Patel suggest for that institution?
Right. For the FISA court, he wants more transparency and accountability. He suggests appointing long-term judges with deep national security expertise, people less swayed by political winds. Also, providing public defenders to argue for the accused in FISA proceedings that would be new, and requiring court reporters to transcribe everything, creating a public record, increasing oversight. He thinks these steps are vital to prevent future surveillance abuse.
Okay, connecting this to the bigger picture. How does Patel see the National Security Council, the wider intelligence community, fitting into this challenge? And what are his solutions there? Seems like this ties back to congressional oversight.
It does, very directly. Patel calls for really aggressive congressional oversight of the NSC and the intelligence community, using subpoena power robustly to expose corruption, hold people accountable. The idea is to bring these agencies back under the control of elected officials, stop them acting like independent powers. He also advocates trimming the workforce at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, and shifting its focus purely to coordinating and sharing intelligence, not gathering it independently, to reduce political interference.
And finally, the military. How does the book view the Department of Defense in relation to this deep state challenge? What reforms does Patel propose there? Seems like he touches on civilian control and maybe the culture.
Yeah. He stresses reasserting presidential authority, making sure the president can choose military leaders loyal to the Constitution, committed to the president's agenda. Accountability starts at the top, he argues. So reforming the officer selection process, removing those who might undermine civilian control or get distracted from the core mission. He also talks about ending the revolving door, between the Pentagon and the defense industry. To cut waste, ensure decisions are in the national interest, not corporate interest. And yes, finally, the book strongly rejects what Patel calls woke ideology in the military. Things like DEI programs, social justice initiatives. He argues they distract from the core mission warfighting and undermine unit cohesion and readiness. That's his perspective.
So to wrap up, Kash Patel's Government Gangsters presents this really powerful, detailed argument about the existence and threat of what he defines as the deep state. It lays out specific allegations of misconduct and offers a very clear, actionable blueprint for fighting back against what he sees as this entrenched corruption. It's a comprehensive call to action.
Absolutely. The book's final message really hammers home that the deep state is, in his view, a real and present danger, and that these reforms for accountability, for transparency, are urgent. It's a passionate call for citizens to get informed, get engaged, fight for truth, and uphold constitutional principles to preserve the republic.
Which really brings us to a final question for you, our listener. Given the detailed arguments, the specific proposed reforms in this book, and the scale of the challenge Patel describes, what steps do you think are most critical for citizens to take? How can people engage with these ideas and push for government accountability? What resonated most from his solutions? For a much, much deeper dive into all of Kash Patel's accounts, his evidence, his detailed solutions, make sure you find the link in our episode description to purchase Government Gangsters. Thank you so much for listening to the Epic Summary Podcast.